Hi, I'm Penny, and I am finally ready to talk about my favorite books that I read in 2018. Now, I read about 170 something books in 2018, so this was quite a hard list to put together, but I stuck all my favorite-ish books into a Goodreads list that I have here, and I've decided I am just going to talk about the top 10, even though I put about 23 books on this list. But the ones at the bottom, they were okay. They were good. They were really good. But they don't really belong in a favorites list. So let's just talk about the top 10. And I've got them in some kind of order. So we'll go from like the good to the really, really good. So number 10 is the Umbrella Academy series by Jared Way and illustrated by Gabriel Ba. So if you don't know, Jared Way is the singer from My Chemical Romance, and these were released kind of back in the day when My Chemical Romance was a lot more prominent than they are now. Are they even still together? I don't even know. So I probably should have read them back then, but I didn't, so I missed out until now. So this is a superhero comic book series. At some point, 47 women all spontaneously give birth, even though they hadn't really been pregnant, and this one rich guy adopts 7 of these children and raises them to be superheroes. But most of the story is set kind of in the future once their father is dead and they're no longer really working together. Some of them are still kind of in the superhero business, some of them are not. They've come together to fight against this big bad, so it's all this kind of family drama along with this creepy and fun superhero world. And even though I sometimes did get the characters a little bit confused, I did really enjoy each of the characters. I thought the superpowers were all really interesting, and I just really loved the vibe of the whole series. So if you like graphic novels and you haven't picked this up, maybe you think a rock star couldn't possibly write a good comic book series, then you are wrong and you should pick them up. So then number 9 is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. Now when I read it, it was The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. However, it happened to be released at the same time as The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Obviously those two names are very similar, and it was entirely not planned that those two books would come out at the same time. So they changed the name of The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle to The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle for its US release. So now the book is out there with 2 different names. Personally, I like the original name better. It's just unfortunate that release timing that happened. So this is a really strange book. We follow this character as they try to solve a murder mystery, but they are solving the murder mystery by reliving the same day over and over. And each day they relive, they are in a different person's head, and they can see their previous selves interacting with their current selves and potentially their other selves. They don't know day to day whose head they're going to wake up in. And it's set up, they find out quite early on that they need to solve the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle, figure out what happened, and so they're trying to do that as well as trying to work together with their other selves, even though they don't know necessarily who their other selves are yet. It's one of these stories with like these twisty plots where everything comes together, and it's really cool. I do know that I have seen some people review it and say that they felt it was a bit confusing. So if you don't like convoluted stories and things that kind of take a bit of brain power, then I wouldn't recommend this. It's also true that some of the characters are less likable than others, so some of the sections of the book are less enjoyable than others, because when the person is in a particular character's head, they start taking on some of those personality traits to some degree, even though they're still also themselves. Also, I would say the ending is a little bit disappointing, but I just found the journey so interesting that I think it made up for that. And the concept is just so amazing that it's definitely one of my favorite books. So number 8, I actually have a copy of. You will notice a lot of these favorite books I don't own yet. I tend to read a lot of my books from the library. I think like 80% of the books I read last year were library books. And then I plan to purchase my favorite ones to keep them in my collection. But I haven't yet purchased some of these favorites because I, try to look for good deals, try to wait till I deserve a reward, that kind of thing. Anyway, The Changeover by Margaret Mayhew was number 8. This is a really old book, actually. I think it was published in 1984, so it's almost as old as me. But I think it really stands the test of time. We follow this girl named Laura, and her mother is a single mother, so she spends a lot of time looking after her younger brother, and occasionally she has visions. She has a vision of something bad happening to her brother, and this is basically the story of her trying to help him and getting involved with some of the local witches as part of trying to save her brother. So this is like quite young adult, but I really enjoyed the feeling of it. Margaret Mayhew is like a well-known New Zealand author, and this is all set in New Zealand, and it has that real small town New Zealand feel that I really enjoy, just because it's what my life feels like, and a lot of other books don't feel like New Zealand, so that's definitely something that I enjoyed that maybe other people wouldn't. I also just really liked some of the lines were killer, which, considering that this is 1984, is amazing. I love Laura, she's such a cool character, and the whole witch concept was really unique and different, and I really enjoyed that as well. The love interest is kind of creepy. That was not the best, but otherwise I really enjoyed this. It was such a fun little read, and if you like kind of quite young adult witchy books, then I'd recommend that one. So number 7 I also have, and that is Invictus by Ryan Groudon. This is a time travel story, and you will see there are a few time travel stories in this selection because I really love time travel stories. This is just a really fun one, and I read it just at the right time when I needed quite a light story. We follow this crew of time travelers. It's set in a future where time travel has become just a regular thing that people do, but it's very regulated because they're afraid that if people change the past, everything will get fucked up. So you have to like study to become a time traveler, and there's all sorts of laws about what you can do while you're time traveling. The main character's mother breaks the law, goes back in time and gets pregnant with someone from the past, and then actually gives birth to him out of time when she's traveling back to the future or back to present time. And so then technically he doesn't have a birth date, which is really strange and leads to some interesting problems. So the most part we follow his crew, who are illegal time travelers. They go back in time, they steal like famous artifacts just before they went missing, and then bring them back to the future, make a lot of money. Eventually they run into something which is like universe threatening, and so they've got to try and save the universe. But for the most part it's just hanging out with the crew. Every single crew member is like quirky and interesting and just fun to hang out with. So I think this is like just a really fun, comfy book. I do think if it had been much darker it could have been even better, but regardless, I still really enjoyed it. So then number 7 is Into the Drowning Deep by Mara Grant. If you don't know, Mara Grant is the pen name for Sean Maguire, who wrote the Wayward Children series, which is very popular on BookTube in recent times. But Into the Drowning Deep is nothing like that series. This is a horror book, and it is also a mermaid horror, which is just amazing. We basically follow this film crew that is going out after a previous film crew has disappeared, and the last footage scene was these mermaids eating the crew essentially. No one's really sure if it's a hoax or not, so they've sent out this new film crew along with a bunch of scientists, some of them who were involved with the previous mission, and they go out into the ocean attempting to find mermaids, and they do find them. And it's horrifying. These mermaids are nothing like any other mermaids I've ever read about. They're so terrifying. It's just amazing. But also, they're such wonderful characters. They're just so cool to hang out with. Again, I guess I like books where you have these characters that are fun. I don't think it was as scary as it could have been, which thank God, because it was scary enough. It was a really interesting to look into how mermaids might actually be like. Terrifying. Terrifying. And number 6, we are back to time travel. I read All Our Wrong Todays that what it's called? Yes, All Our Wrong Todays by Elan. So in this story, we basically follow this guy whose father invented time travel, and he went back in time, and they lived in this kind of utopia. His father invented time travel. He went back in time, fucked everything up, and essentially brought us to where we are now. So like, he's the one who ruined everything we have now. And it's just telling his story about how he did that. It's a really cool little story. He's kind of a screw up, obviously, since he screwed up everything. My thing stopped filming and I don't know where I was up to talking. Anyway, he's trying to figure out how he might fix things to get things back to being the utopia that they used to be. It's a really interesting story, and if you like time travel stories and you haven't read this one, then you really should. Then number 5 is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I think, obviously, Brandon Sanderson is one of my favorite authors, so if I read something in 2018 by him, it had to be on the list. This was Brandon Sanderson's first published work, and a lot of people suggest that you don't start with this because they say it's not as good as some of his later books, and they often say you should start with the Mistborn trilogy, which I did, and I love the Mistborn trilogy, but also, this is amazing, so you could start with this too if you want, no problems. I think it's pretty representative of Brandon Sanderson's work. You have got this prince living in this world where sometimes people get, what's it called, the Shayod? I forget. Something where suddenly their skin goes all horrible. They're essentially dead except that they're still alive. And people consider them to be cursed because there used to be this city called Elantris where everyone was beautiful and magical and glowing and perfect, and everyone treated them like gods, but then one day they all woke up with the Shayod and they were cursed, and people essentially locked them away in the city of Elantris. This prince lives in the city kind of next to or around Elantris. He one day wakes up with the Shayod, so you're following him. You're also following this princess from another land who was betrothed to him, and you're following this priest guy who has come to try and convert everyone in the city to a new religion. Otherwise his god is going to kill everyone. As a Brandon Sanderson novel, of course, the different storylines all interweave beautifully. There's an amazing magic system, and there are lots of twists of turns, and at the end, everything is different. I really love this story. The characters are just so well told. I actually listened to it, half of it on audiobook, which was okay, but I do think it would have been just as good to read physically from the bits that I did read. So if you have a thing for reading things in like the order they were published, then don't worry, you can start with this one. It will be fine. It's still a really, 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 really good book. A little bit dense maybe, but very worth it. So number 4 is Vengeful by V. Schwab. So this is the sequel to Vicious, which follows these 2 university students who are studying people who have had near-death experiences, or they've died and they've come back to life experiences, and then have gained these superpowers. They're studying that, but you're also following them in the future where they're now enemies with superpowers out to kill each other, and you're following through those 2 timelines trying to work out how they got to that situation and what's going to happen now. Vengeful is the sequel, kind of does the same thing, jumping around in time, and unfortunately that isn't as well executed as it could have been. There's a lot of characters going on now, and I think that lack of focus hurt it. However, it's still one of my favorite books of 2018 because some of the characters, the new characters in this book, are amazing. The way that people get superpowers here is that whatever they were thinking when they die influences the powers they have when they're brought back to life. And some of the powers in this book are just amazing, and so that made it totally worth it for me. I love the characters, especially everyone talks about Marcella. I love Marcella. I think she could have been so much more than she is in this book, but still, I was really happy to read about her. Just every time I would read a bit of this book and then I would talk to people about it, I would just be so excited about some of the different things that were happening. I do think as a whole it could have been more cohesive. I think it would have been nicer if Marcella had more of her own story and like screw carrying on from the previous story. I think if it had been more of a spin-off rather than a sequel, it would have been better. But this world still exists. V. Schwab can still come back to it and still keep building on it. So hopefully she will do that. I love this book. I will definitely read it again at some point. So number 3 was Opal by Maggie Stiefvater. So this was a very short little novella. It follows on from the Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater, so you can't really talk about what Opal is about if you don't know what the Raven Cycle is about. And talking about what the Raven Cycle is about is really hard because it's about so much. The original pitch was essentially that you follow this girl named Blue, who's always been told by her psychic family that when she kisses her true love, he's going to die. She meets up with these private school boys who are working together searching for this Welsh king who supposedly when you wake him, he will grant you a wish. But there's also a whole bunch of other crazy stuff going on that I can't talk about because it's spoilers, but there's psychics, there's all sorts of different magical people, there's lots of like creepy stuff. It's really not about Blue at all. She's just one of a cast of amazing characters. I recently re-listened to the Raven Cycle and I love it. So if you haven't read the Raven Cycle, I personally really recommend it. The writing style is very lyrical, and that's what I really loved about Opal. Opal follows a very strange girl type creature, and basically is just talking through her experiences in the human world. It's all written very beautifully. It made me cry. It was so lovely. And now that I finished rereading the Raven Cycle, I should really reread Opal. It's just beautiful, and I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it. So if you've read the Raven Cycle and you love the Raven Cycle, then you really need to read Opal. It's really, really lovely. Okay, so I've just realized that 2 and 3 I probably should have grouped together since I grouped the Umbrella Academy series all together. These two kind of go together too. So number 3 is The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, and then number 2 is The Boy on the Bridge by M.R. Carey. Now these are adult horror / action books. They are very scary and creepy, but they also just do really great character analysis, and I really liked what they had to say about humanity and how we might deal with certain circumstances. It's spoilers to say what kind of book this is, unfortunately, because it would really help to explain what this book's about. But it starts out, you've got this young girl in a wheelchair locked in a cell. These soldiers come every day and they put guns to her head, and then they wheel her out into a classroom where there's a whole bunch of other students in the same situation, like strapped to these wheelchairs in the classroom. So you're set up following this young girl and trying to work out why she's in this situation. It turns out to be really creepy and apocalyptic. The character development is so wonderful, and the different children characters were my favorite. The adults are okay, but the children characters are so great. It's definitely not young adult or children's books, despite the fact that the children are the best characters. And these books came out a while ago now, so if you haven't read them, I still definitely recommend going and reading them. 2014, like that's not that long ago, is it? 2014, 2017. Well, they're not actually that long ago. The Girl with All the Gifts was 2014, and The Boy on the Bridge, the sequel, was 2017, which is only a couple of years ago. And still I saw hardly anyone talking about The Boy on the Bridge. I think I saw Regan from Prose Project talk about it, but nobody else, honestly. If you like creepy horror books, these ones are great. Okay, so finally we are up to number 1. It's definitely finally because we are having a heat wave here in New Zealand, and so it is really hot, and I would like to take a break from filming. But I also really want to talk about my number 1 book, and I'm so sad. I really need to get some copies of them because this is a graphic novel series and I completely loved it, and that is the Lock and Key series by Joe Hill. And I actually found out Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. Crazy, but once I found that out, I was like, well, that makes sense. These books are so creepy. We follow this family who go through a very traumatic experience, so they move back to the old family home. It's like this big old mansion, and the children start finding these keys, and the keys have different magical powers, and all this weird creepy stuff happens. There's like keys that let you change gender, keys that let you go through any door to another, whatever other door you want to go to, keys that let you change size, keys that let you become a ghost, keys. There's just so many keys, and they all have really cool powers, and the eventual like explanation of the keys is so creepy and cool, and I really want to reread the series. I think this year I might try to get my hands on the physical copies. It's like a 6-book series, so it's a little bit expensive, or 6 volumes, but the art is like not amazing, but it's still really cool. There are some pages which are amazing, actually. I take it back. Some of the pages are amazing. And last year I tried really hard to find some graphic novel series that I enjoy. A lot of them I feel fall short for me in terms of the actual story. But Lock and Key was not like that. I loved Lock and Key's story. I love the characters. The art was cool. So creepy and dark. I think if you like graphic novels and you haven't read Lock and Key, then please read Lock and Key just for me, and then come and talk to me about it. Oh no, you're running out of power. Quickly. My camera's running out of power, so we have to finish. Luckily, I've talked about all the books. If you've read any of the books that I talked about, then please, I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.